and gratitude to those who brought me here. Thank you, Reverend. Well, I'm going to ad-lib for a moment because my brother came up here and told a story. He gave me a little bit more accolades than I deserved. But I will return the favor and let you know that I'm a shy person by nature. No one believes this because I appear to be an extrovert. But this is not what Randy normally chooses to do, yet Randy has done it hundreds of times. Kicking and screaming, fighting it all the way, I always get put in this position, and I never say no. But I've come to respect and honor my brother. I've only met him 4 years ago, and we found out that we were both born the same year. We are both alphas, most important, and what he was explaining is it's a big thing to us because our fraternity, like Pastor, we abide by the creed of manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. Martin Luther King was also an alpha. I don't know that you know that. He was a member of Alpha Psi Alpha fraternity that I pledged 34 years ago today. Many years in Alpha. Byron is an Alpha inspiration. He does so much for so many, for so little in return. And let's honor my brother Byron. I have not had a chance to say it publicly, but he is one of the few who can pull me out of my little shy comfort zone and get me on the stage. So please let me thank him. So I was a grandma's boy by virtue of being born premature. And you know, young mothers aren't as good at some things. And one of the stories I heard later from my grandmother was that, well, little babies have colds and little issues, and preemies particularly have respiratory problems. You know some. So there was a time my grandmother saw my mother using an instrument trying to get the snot out of my nose, because little babies, you still try to defend yourself. And she's trying, and this baby's making it difficult, wiggling, and she's getting frustrated. And my grandmother, old school, said, "Give me that child." And she took her mouth and put it over my nose and sucked it out and spit it out. And she saw the mother of that child go, ugh. And because of that, she basically said, that's gonna be my child. And so, if you pick up a little twist and a twang, that's a little bit New York and a little bit something else, that something else is because my grandmother, when she retired, having been a maid in New York, and she moved back to a tiny island called Grenada, an island that you may recall Reagan invaded back in the 1980s if you're old enough. But there's something else about that island. That island gave birth to the mother of Mlk X. And Mlk X's mother, being from Grenada, and there are many people in the civil rights movement that you may not be aware of who came from those little islands. You know, Farrakhan has Caribbean roots. Most people aren't aware of that. Well, of course you would have known about Marcus Garvey. But on and on and on, there are many of them came through New York and uptown in New York who were island originated. Shirley Chisholm had island roots, and she represented the district in the area where I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. So, a little bit of history. Let's delve a little bit more into history. We're going to talk about a revered person, Martin Luther King. And so he wasn't stagnant, because history takes you through different pathways, through different events that influence how you behave, how you present yourself. And we know Martin evolved on the stage back in the 50s, trying to represent and serve a very limited, powerless people. Black folks, Negroes, to be contemporary, had no place to turn to in the 1950s. Not represented in the media, not represented really in Congress, not represented in the White House for sure. No access to the three branches and the most important branch. no power. Not much different than 100 years earlier. They needed a voice. They needed a voice that could reach across the nation. I can tell you this, when we speak of his dream, he would have loved to see this room today. This would be representative of the America, at least visually, that he would have loved to have his children grow up in. A place where we came together regardless of who we think we are. But let's talk a second about who we really are. What we are biologically is 99.3% the same. A surgeon does not need to use different instruments to do surgery on a black or white person. When you get through that one organ, it's called the skin. It is an organ. It has a function. The skin is biologically identical, except there is a hue called pigmentation that Mother Nature put in that because of the origins of the people closer to a less protected area of the ozone layer. And so the pigmentation was put in place to protect them from the sun. Remove that substance called melanin, and we are 100% identical. But for that one substance, oh yes, we got different little tones in our hair and different things like that, but that again is nature's protection. We're the same species, biologically identical. And if we are in church, we can put it to God made us the same. But someone told a lie 400 years ago, and that lie permeates today, to where we have found a way to divide ourselves for 4 centuries based on that lie. A lie that basically created an economic opportunism to exploit a group that carried melanin and to cast them as a lesser being. And there was never any truth to that lie, because if you believe the subsequent lies that follow, we didn't have, hear me, the word, we didn't have the cerebral processes to play quarterback. These are permeations of that lie. Yet, a person born of that race has proven that he can win 3 Super Bowls even when you take away the best receiver that he had. And you think of all the other lies, all the things we couldn't do that history and time and opportunity have dismissed. And you think it was a big lie told by opportunists whose economic greed led them to create that false narrative. So let's go to Martin for a second with that thought. And I want to let you know that Martin, the man we celebrate today, as a reminder of what can be accomplished with non-violent interactions, that never changed in his persona, really was that peaceful pastor who evolved into a, I'm going to use a bad word, revolutionary leader. He evolved into that, and I'll get to that. And the evolution and the trajectory of his philosophy and ideology may well have led to his death. Provocative. The man evolved, and the evolution will bring us right into this room. I'll explain that. I won't get too professorial on you, I promise. But I'll tell you this. He told us he was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. That movement in South Africa, Mahatma Gandhi was fighting for the rights of his people. There were Indians in South Africa, there still are. There were whites in South Africa, there still are. There are coloreds in South Africa who are not us, because we are blacks. They created a system called apartheid, 4 rungs, the whites, the Indians, the coloreds, and the blacks. and everyone had a place and a role. Gandhi was fighting for the Indians' rights, and some coloreds were incorporated into his struggle. Mythically, Martin and others, with the limitations of history and information, thought he was an inspiration. We would later learn that he, in fact, was a subscriber to the apartheid philosophy where blacks were concerned. He was, in fact, an avowed racist, as current history has revealed. And so his statues are being torn down all over Africa, where he was once revered. Time, scholarship, information, revelation teach us, and sometimes we have to revisit those beliefs. So MLK, let's go back. The little pastor from Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, he first sought to placate, to comfort, even to appease the majority population when he started this almost apologetic fight for civil rights. The man said, hey, I'm not here to triumph over you as white people. I'm not here to challenge your dominance and your power structure. Hear me. At Vanderbilt in 1957, he professed his belief that there is a white South, more open-minded moderates than the surface would reveal. In the South, there are more open-minded moderates, he said, and he urged them to lead the region through the necessity of transition to provide equal treatment for black citizens. Can you get any more mild than this? He reassured them that the aim of the movement was not to defeat or humiliate the white man, but to win his friendship and understanding. I'm not here to dethrone you. I'm not here to disrupt the power struggle. But this is 1955. He said anything else, he's a dead man. Please, I'm no threat to you. Just befriend us and get to know us. It started that mild. His words, naive, maybe, wishful, hopeful, not at all. I contend that that was strategic. He had no power base. What can you do in the South in the 1950s? No one saw a bus boycott at that time. No one saw the actions that would come. So over the course of 10 years, watching a group of accommodationist clergymen, the church wasn't always down with the struggle. The church very often had actors who protected their narrow interests, and they sold out the struggle. Not everybody opened their church to the movement. The church was used in the divide and rule strategy of the majority population to basically tell Martin and the others to slow down. Just, respect a process that they never knew was going anywhere. They allowed themselves to be co-opted. And then they outwardly condemned the aggressive actions, the excessive actions, the disrespectful and hasty actions of those young people who dared do the unthinkable. And what was that sin they committed? They marched in the streets. They sat in at lunch counters. They allowed themselves to be bitten by dogs and hosed down in the streets. They dared ask for school integration. And for doing that, they were seen as being too divisive. And they were going to alienate the larger population. That was too much. Those actions were seen as too much, And so, Martin, seeing 10 years later that those very peaceful actions were not going to move the needle effectively, even though we did get a Civil Rights Act, very tame one, in 1957. But what he saw was that, hey, we have other avenues to get some wins. And one of the best avenues was through the courts. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund started to get some wins. So seeing this, Martin took the position that white moderates were interested in order and preserving the status quo much more than they were in justice. And they really weren't allies. Not truly, not en masse. In fact, his later speeches pointed out, that they were more likely to sit quietly and watch evils go on than to risk putting themselves on the line. He specifically said the biggest problem we have is not the ones out on the street, not the Klan, not those throwing tomatoes, but those good white people of conscience who sit quietly and pretend that what is happening really is not. The apathy, the silent assent, if not consent, to evil. That, he said, because you knew better. You knew better than the backcountry guy who really was just twisted and he was just basically fed a lie that he had no power to rationalize in his own mind. But you intellectuals, moderates, middle class, you know better. You knew better. And so when you sit in silence, you become the enemy. So Martin changed from being accommodationist almost, apologetic, to now he's calling them out. He's calling them out. He's taken one step towards a revolutionary process. This isn't working. A decade later, let me at least call you out. And then, of course, he was bolstered unknowingly. He was bolstered by the victories, Sister President, the NAACP, great work, Brown v. Board. All of a sudden, we've gotten rid of Plessy versus Ferguson. Separate but equal is no longer the law of the land, in principle. In principle. And then we've got other victories. Sweat v. Painter now. We can think of higher ed, and we can actually get into law schools, in principle. In principle. And of course, Loving versus Virginia. My God. I could dare look at this lady and say, I love you, sweetie, can I marry you? I couldn't do that before in the United States. Because even though we're 99.3% identical, the law of the land says, not that I couldn't marry you, actually, it said that you couldn't marry me. That was the other way around. The way it was framed, now I could marry someone Hispanic, I could marry someone Chinese, I could marry someone Native American. And in theory, I could marry someone white, but the forbidding was on whites to marry blacks. That's the way the law was framed. Until 1967, after Byron and I were walking the earth. So it ain't that long now, And so, we evolved. The 60s is when we came along, And noting that in those states, in Mississippi, in Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, South Carolina, Georgia, even Texas, and even in today's progressive, Virginia and North Carolina, blacks, Negroes, coloreds, still lived in a state of terror because the apparatus of the state to which their tax dollars were paid, was used with impunity to wreak havoc and vengeance against them. Let's not forget, these are not things that are pleasant to hear, but they are, in fact, truths that we can't ignore. There was nothing that stopped a mouthy, uppity nigga like me from getting dragged out of his mother's house at night and killed with impunity. That was reality because thousands were lynched for the mere fact that they may have looked at or touched somebody who was 99.3% identical to them but for the melanin. That could have got you killed. That's called terrorism. Because it wasn't rogue actors who did those killings. They were condoned by apparatus of the state. But there are good men here, but those who wore your uniform were accessories to murder and genocide. And these are facts. No one today, having endured the evolving sense of decency that we now live under, would abide by the lynching of a human being in public and bring your children to watch. You know, we evolved from where a mother, are you a mother? A mother would have had her child sold by a man who fully expected her to show up the next day and cook his meals. We evolved from where, after being told a lie that we should be enslaved because we were really akin to chattel, we were really animals. That was the falsehood that was perpetrated, that we were animals. But my God, you would not let your child nurse on the breast of a goat. If you truly believe this was an animal, you wouldn't put your precious child to be nursed by an animal, would you? But black women nursed powerful white children whose parents spewed the falsehood that we are enslaving them because they are lesser beings, they're animals, yet our children can feed off their milk. How many of you have had some hyena milk lately? It doesn't work. It was all a lie. Martin got to that point as I winded up. Martin got to that point. I said that'd be 10 minutes. Byron says no, a little longer, so I'm all right with it. Okay. Martin got to that point in the 60s where he started to attack the hypocrisies. You know, he started to call it out. He said, you know, think about this. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. He said, hear his words, oppressors never voluntarily give up freedom to the oppressed. It always had to be demanded by extremists for justice. Who are we talking about, Martin or Malcolm? That was Martin saying that. Malcolm had come on the scene by then, and the young people started to gravitate more towards the Panthers, to Malcolm, to the forces that were about confrontation. I'll tell you something historical. There is only one historically oppressed people in the history of modern civilization that has not used terrorism against the oppressor. That's African Americans. Do your history. One people that have chosen exclusively, as a group, peace, shaming maybe, the whole world's watching, but have never resorted to armed conflict or terrorism against its oppressors. Look around the world at all oppressed peoples and they took to arms. It has not happened. Because there is the false hope and belief that maybe conscience will awake and people will eventually see that there is no point in hating on your fellow countrymen. You think of a car. Think of a car. When we hate against each other, look at a car. And it has 4 cylinders. And if we were to disable one of those cylinders, we're still one car, one nation. And we're running on 3/4 power. Are we as strong? Are we as strong? How do we sit up there and cheer for that speedy gazelle who is 99.3% the same as we are, but he's got a dark hue as he wins that Olympic gold medal. And we wave the flag and cheer for him, but then we have a problem accepting him as an equal brother. Jesse Owens brought pride and joy to a whole bunch of people and came home and could not sit at the lunch counter and be served. 45,000 soldiers returned and found that captured Nazis were more revered in America than they were in their own country. The captured soldiers from the enemy they went to fight were in the front of the train while they were relegated to the back in their own country. These are facts. How do you get over that? But Martin thought the scam needs to be exposed. And so Martin moved on. Now, recognizing that shaming wasn't having the effect either. He recognized that he was fighting the wrong war. Hear me? Are you with me, church? Martin was fighting a war for racial equality against a force that would never concede that they saw the world in zero-sum terms. If I give you your rights, that means I must be surrendering some of mine. No, it doesn't. But he understood that the mentality that governed all of this was really not social, it was economic. It was economic. Martin, you're taking this thing personally. It's about the almighty dollar. Because if I give you your rights, you can compete with me. If I give you your rights, you want to live next to me. That's the problem. And so Martin decided, you are not the only victims. Those who were told the lie by the power sector were also victims. Because there in the South were all these equally poor whites who were generationally oppressed. And they did not even know it. They were voting against their interests. They had more in common with poor blacks than they did with rich whites. But the myth of whiteness was used to control their minds. And they bought the lie. And Martin thought, let me enlighten them. Let's fight this war on economic grounds. The poor people's march. And now the system said, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, wow, you try to put white people under your spell. We're not going to have this. We need this division to continue. We need that 0.7% to dominate the conversation. We need the melanin to do its job and divide us. And if you start talking to people about, hold up, the system is rigged, not just against you, but also against you. And they come to understand, oh my gosh, the oligarchs, it's really, they are the manipulators and the victims are all races who have been suppressed. And they realized that poor people's march was going to bring black people and white people and brown people and red people together to demand economic justice. And they said, Martin, you got to go, brother. You got to go. And that's why Martin went. As long as Martin was fighting the battle of attrition for black equality, he was no threat. Because they had in their pocket a secret weapon, division. They had enough. The people throwing the tomatoes were not middle class or upper class whites. They were the manipulated poor whites who were told it's your job to keep them down or they're coming for your daughters. It's your job to keep them from going to school or they're going to be raping your daughters. It hasn't happened. The lie from the 60s, we all went to school together for 50 years and we played together. And if you look at this next generation of kids, you got hope for them. You want to believe now because these kids ain't having it. And we really thought we weren't having it, but then we grew up. And others got in the way and divided us. And Martin almost pulled it off with the garbage men strike. He was going to get them all, at least to listen, and he was spellbinding. And if he started to get white Southerners to listen to the message of economic justice, because he thought it was a post-racial society after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act had passed. So we can move on to a broader fight. but the forces of the vision were too strong. And we see it now. Whenever you make some progress, the Civil Rights Act led Southern whites to run as fast as they could out of the Democratic Party. How dare you support equality? And they haven't returned. Get out of here. We can't be with you if you are for equality in the land of equality. They never believed it. It was just empty words. And there were times that blacks felt hopeful. We felt hopeful when Jimmy Carter was elected because he put a few blacks in the cabinet and we thought, we're making progress. And then Ronald Reagan was elected and we felt despair because he started his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi and sent the message, we're going backwards with this thing. And then again, we felt oh so hopeful when Bill Clinton was elected. First black president we called him. Because Bill. And then they went ahead and passed the crime bill and incarcerated millions of young black males for petty crimes. And then we went ahead and legalized the very drugs that caused them to be incarcerated by the millions. These are just facts. No one is making anything up here. We felt, we believed, and just when we thought there was hope, it reversed again. And then we shouted to the rooftops when Barack Obama was elected. And we felt joy that so many white people voted for this black man. We still did. We felt great about that. We thought maybe we read the country wrong. I thought so. And maybe we did read it wrong. But the price that we are now paying for Barack's election and the price that we will pay tells you whenever you dare feel too good about yourself, we will remind you about the 0.7. It always comes back to that 0.7. Thank you very much.